They say when a woman returns, it's loud emotional texts, dramatic apologies, or sudden confessions. But the truth? It's almost never like that. Real comebacks begin quietly, subtly. Long before the message arrives, long before the call is made, there are signs, small shifts in her energy that most men never notice. In today's video, we'll uncover the early, often invisible signs that she's close to coming back. These moments only appear when you've done the hard thing, stayed silent, stayed grounded, and let your stoic presence speak louder than words. If you're ready to see what most miss, stay with me. And if this resonates, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. Number 1. Her curiosity quietly returns. Before contact ever returns, something far more subtle takes shape beneath the surface. Curiosity. Not the dramatic kind that leads to impulsive messages or late-night calls, but the quiet, private, wondering she never talks about. She begins to think about you in moments when her mind is unguarded during idle time, while scrolling, while something reminds her of a version of life that once felt familiar. The certainty she once had about you starts to erode, and in its place, questions begin to form. She wonders what your days look like now, whether your life feels lighter or heavier without her presence, whether you're still emotionally available in the same way, or if something in you has shifted. These questions don't come with answers, and that's exactly why they linger. She doesn't ask you directly. Instead, she watches quietly. She may check your social presence without engaging. She may ask mutual connections, casual questions that sound harmless on the surface. Or she may simply sit with the thought of you longer than she expects, replaying fragments of who you were and comparing them to who you might be now. What's important here is that this curiosity isn't fueled by need, it's fueled by uncertainty. When you were predictable, curiosity had no reason to exist. Your reactions, your availability, your emotional position in her life were already known. But when you stopped explaining yourself, stopped clarifying where you stood, stopped offering emotional updates, you removed the map she used to navigate you. And without a map, the mind begins to explore. Stoic philosophy has long understood this dynamic. When a man stops trying to control how he's perceived, he unintentionally becomes more observed. Silence, when chosen rather than forced, creates space. And space invites attention. You didn't disappear in chaos or resentment. You didn't announce your withdrawal. You simply continued living with steadiness. That calm absence didn't erase you. It sharpened her awareness of you. Curiosity is the first crack in emotional closure. It doesn't mean regret yet. It doesn't mean longing or desire in its full form. It means the old mental file labeled, "I understand him," no longer feels accurate. And the mind dislikes unfinished understanding. So it revisits. It reconsiders. It asks quiet questions in the background. From a Stoic perspective, this is not something you provoke, it's something you allow. By refusing to chase reassurance or clarity, you let reality speak for itself. And reality, when left uninterrupted, often raises more questions than explanations ever could. Her curiosity isn't a signal to act. It's a sign that your silence has restored weight to your presence. And once curiosity returns, the emotional door she thought was closed is no longer fully shut. It's simply unattended. Pause for a moment and sit with what this really means. Curiosity doesn't announce itself loudly, but it changes everything quietly. When uncertainty replaces certainty, the dynamic has already shifted. Take a breath and reflect on whether you've felt this shift before, either in yourself or in someone else. If this resonates, leave a comment sharing what stood out to you, or simply type "Curiosity changes the balance" below. Your reflection matters, and it's often in these quiet realizations that the deeper understanding begins. Number 2. Small excuses to reopen contact. When contact finally reappears, it almost never arrives carrying emotion. There's no confession, no apology, no admission of missing you. Instead, It shows up dressed as something ordinary, almost forgettable. A simple question, a comment about something minor, a reason that, if examined closely, doesn't truly require reaching out at all. And that's intentional. She isn't ready to step into vulnerability yet. What she's doing instead is testing the emotional temperature. This first message is not about the subject it mentions. The topic is merely camouflage. What she's really asking is unspoken. Is it safe to approach you again? Are you still where I left you? Will the old dynamic snap back into place if I extend a hand? She chooses something casual because casual contact feels low risk. It allows her to engage without revealing intention, without exposing emotion, and without committing to anything beyond the moment itself. From the outside, this kind of message can look insignificant, easy to dismiss, easy to misinterpret, but psychologically, it's loaded. It means silence has done something explanations never could. It created uncertainty, and uncertainty disrupts emotional equilibrium. The Stoics understood that people act from imbalance long before they understand the cause of it. When inner stability shifts, behavior follows first. Insight comes later. That's why the excuse feels slightly off, slightly unnecessary, because the real motivation isn't logic, it's internal pressure. The mind wants resolution. It wants to know where it stands. And when curiosity and uncertainty have been left unanswered for long enough, the smallest opening becomes enough justification to act. What matters most here is how different this feels from past contact. Before, reaching out may have felt effortless, routine, predictable. Now, even a simple message carries weight. She's aware, consciously or not, that something has changed. You didn't chase. You didn't smooth things over. You didn't rush to restore comfort. And because of that, she no longer knows what response to expect. Stoic restraint plays a quiet but powerful role here. By not reacting impulsively, by not over-explaining or rushing to re-establish familiarity, you change the cost of contact. The door is no longer wide open, but it isn't slammed shut either. It simply requires intention to walk through, and intention feels risky when certainty is gone. This is why these small excuses appear before anything meaningful. They're reconnaissance, a way to gather emotional information without revealing personal stakes. It's not about restarting the relationship yet. It's about seeing whether the ground beneath her feet is stable, or if stepping forward will require vulnerability she's not ready to face. Number 3. Her emotional tone softens. Long before her words say anything meaningful, her tone tells the real story. The edge that once lived in her messages is gone. The defensiveness, the guarded phrasing, the subtle tension that made every interaction feel like a negotiation. What replaces it isn't enthusiasm or vulnerability yet. It's softness, a calmer rhythm, fewer sharp turns, a tone that feels more human than strategic. And this shift matters far more than whatever she actually says. Emotional tone is rarely conscious. People can choose their words, but tone leaks out from beneath intention. When someone feels tense or emotionally guarded, that tension shapes how they communicate, even when they try to hide it. When the tension fades, communication loosens naturally. Sentences breathe. Pauses feel less calculated. There's less urgency to protect position or control outcome. Seneca understood this well. He wrote that emotions reveal themselves through rhythm and tone, long before they reveal themselves through confession. Before someone admits how they feel, their emotional state has already begun, expressing itself indirectly. Softness is one of those expressions, and it only appears when the nervous system no longer feels threatened. Earlier, her tone may have been clipped, distant, or overly neutral in a way that felt artificial. That kind of emotional armor exists to prevent vulnerability, but armor is exhausting to maintain. When the perceived threat disappears, no pressure, no chasing, no demand for clarity, it comes off on its own. Your silence played a key role here, not silence as punishment or withdrawal, but silence as steadiness. You didn't pursue resolution. You didn't ask for reassurance. You didn't try to manage her emotions. And without resistance, emotional friction faded. From a Stoic perspective, this is the outcome of non-interference. When you stop trying to control another person's emotional state, you become a calm reference point instead of an emotional variable. Calm creates safety, not through reassurance, but through consistency. That safety shows up first in tone. Softness isn't confession, it's preparation. And when tone softens, it signals that the ground inside her is stabilizing, making closeness possible again through quiet emotional safety, not force. Number 4. Shared memories resurface. When shared memories begin to resurface, they rarely arrive announced. She doesn't say she misses you. She doesn't frame it as reflection or regret. Instead, it slips into conversation as something casual, an inside joke, a passing reference, a moment that once felt ordinary but now carries a subtle weight. On the surface, it sounds harmless, but emotionally, it's deliberate. This isn't nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It's a quiet attempt at reconnection. Memories are emotional shortcuts. They allow someone to return to a feeling without asking permission. When she brings up a shared moment, she isn't just recalling the past. She's testing whether the emotional bridge between you still exists. She's seeing if that version of closeness can be accessed again without risk. Because if the memory still lands, if it still feels warm or familiar, then the bond was never fully gone. It was simply dormant. What's important is the type of memory she chooses. It's rarely dramatic, not the big arguments or the painful endings. It's the small, human moments, the private humor, the routines, the shared experiences that existed when things felt effortless. Those memories represent emotional safety. They come from a time when connection didn't require negotiation, when being close felt natural. From a Stoic perspective, this is where restraint matters. A Stoic man does not cling to the past. He doesn't romanticize it or attempt to revive it through force. But he understands symbolism. He understands that the mind reaches backward when it wants to feel forward again. The resurfacing of memories isn't about reliving what was. It's about assessing whether closeness is still possible now. By not chasing these moments or overreacting to them, you maintain emotional balance. You acknowledge the memory without anchoring yourself to it, and that restraint changes the dynamic. If you were to grasp at the past, you would signal need. If you were to dismiss it coldly, you would signal distance. But calm acknowledgement, neither clinging nor rejecting, signals strength and presence. Memories resurface when someone wants to feel close again without saying it. They are a form of emotional testing that feels safer than vulnerability. If she were to say she misses you outright, she would risk rejection or imbalance. But a memory, a joke, a shared reference, that feels low risk. It allows her to observe your response without exposing her heart. Stoic philosophy teaches that the past should inform, not control. You don't need to reopen old doors or reframe history. The fact that she's referencing it tells you enough. It means the emotional imprint remains. It means silence didn't erase connection. It clarified it. When shared memories return, it's not an accident. It's a sign that she's searching for emotional continuity. And while a Stoic man doesn't live in what was, he recognizes when the past is being used as a bridge one carefully extended, quietly, to see if closeness can exist again without words. As you sit with this, take a moment to notice what isn't being said by her and by you. Shared memories don't resurface to pull you backward. They appear to test whether you're grounded enough to stay present without losing balance. This is a quiet checkpoint, not a call to act. Reflect on how restraint feels in moments like this, how acknowledging without grasping preserves your center. If this resonates, leave a comment sharing what stood out to you, or simply type, "I remain grounded," to mark that you understand the difference between remembering and returning. Number 5. She tests your availability. When her behavior starts to feel inconsistent, it's easy to mistake it for confusion. One day she replies slowly, almost distant. The next, she's suddenly quick and engaged. She pulls back, then reappears without explanation. But these shifts aren't random. They're observational. She's watching how you respond to changes in access. In the past, your availability may have been predictable. When she leaned in, you followed. When she pulled away, you reacted. That responsiveness gave her emotional feedback. It told her where she stood without her having to ask. Now, that pattern is gone, and without it, she needs information, not through conversation, but through behavior. By changing her pace, she observes yours. By withdrawing briefly, she watches to see if you chase. By returning unexpectedly, she notices whether your energy shifts. This isn't a conscious test designed to manipulate. It's a natural response to uncertainty. When emotional certainty disappears, the mind looks for signs of control. Stoicism places great value on consistency, not in constant availability, but in inner stability. When your tone, rhythm, and presence don't fluctuate based on her attention, something unfamiliar appears. Emotional steadiness. You're not chasing, and you're not punishing. You're simply grounded. And grounded behavior stands out when someone else is unsure. Most people adjust themselves in response to attention. They become more eager when engagement increases and more anxious when it fades. That adjustment reveals dependence. But when your pace remains the same, her tests produce no clear answer. And that lack of clarity creates tension, not conflict, but curiosity. Uncertainty has a magnetic quality. The mind is drawn to what it cannot easily predict. When she no longer knows whether her presence affects your center, she becomes more aware of you. Your calm stops feeling passive and starts feeling intentional. Not because you're doing less, but because you're no longer reacting. This is where attraction often begins to reform. Not through intensity or effort, but through contrast. Your steadiness becomes a reference point against her fluctuating engagement. And that contrast quietly shifts the dynamic. She senses that your presence exists independently of her actions. Stoic philosophy teaches self-governance. You don't let external behavior dictate your internal state. You don't speed up or slow down to match inconsistency. You remain centered. And when you do, her testing doesn't pull you off balance. It reveals that balance instead. Number 6. Her ego stops competing with your silence. In the beginning, your silence doesn't feel neutral to her. It feels like a challenge. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. Silence can bruise the ego when it interrupts expectation. When she was used to reaction, explanation, or emotional feedback, your absence of response created friction. It felt like something to push against, and the ego always wants to push back. At first, she may have framed the distance as a contest. Who will break first? Who will regain control? Who will reassert position? The silence became something to resist, something to outlast. This isn't about hostility. It's about pride. The ego interprets non-engagement as loss of influence, and it responds by trying to restore balance through endurance. But resistance is tiring. It requires energy. It requires focus. And over time, without reinforcement, it weakens. Epictetus understood this deeply. He taught that resistance only survives through engagement. The moment there is no opponent, the struggle collapses under its own weight. Ego needs reaction to stay alive. Without it, it has nothing to feed on. Your silence didn't argue. It didn't provoke. It didn't explain. And because of that, there was nothing for her pride to fight. No emotional rope to pull. No resistance to measure herself against. What initially felt like a standoff slowly turned into stillness. And stillness exposes how unnecessary the struggle was in the first place. This is the point where something important shifts. She stops trying to win the distance. Not because she lost, but because winning no longer means anything. Acceptance begins quietly here. The emotional energy that once fueled resistance starts to drain away. And in its place, something calmer takes root. From a Stoic perspective, this is not dominance, it's detachment. You didn't silence yourself to punish or control. You simply refused to participate in an emotional contest that led nowhere. By doing nothing, you remove the battlefield. And when there is no battlefield, the fight cannot continue. When her ego stops competing with your silence, it's a sign that the internal struggle has softened. Pride has stepped aside. The need to maintain position has faded. And without that need, space opens for something more honest to emerge. This is not the moment of return yet, but it's a necessary passage. When ego exhaustion sets in, clarity becomes possible. And clarity is what allows connection to be reconsidered, not from a place of power or pride, but from quiet acceptance. Number 7. Indirect personal questions appear. When her questions begin to shift, the change is subtle but meaningful. She doesn't ask how you feel about her. She doesn't bring up the relationship or reopen old emotional ground. Instead, her curiosity turns toward your life, your work, your routines, your focus, your direction. On the surface, these questions seem neutral, but emotionally, they signal something deeper. She is no longer measuring you through emotion alone. She's reassessing your value through structure, purpose, and trajectory. Earlier, the emotional dynamic may have defined how she perceived you, how available you were, how reactive, how invested. Now, with that emotional noise gone, something else comes into focus. Who you are when you're not trying to be chosen. Indirect questions feel safer than direct ones. Asking about your direction doesn't require vulnerability. It doesn't expose longing or uncertainty, but it allows her to gather information. She's trying to understand what anchors you now, whether your life feels grounded, whether you're building something that doesn't revolve around her presence. Stoic philosophy has always emphasized this distinction. A man grounded in purpose doesn't persuade, he progresses. He doesn't explain his value, he lives it. Epictetus taught that character reveals itself through action, not declaration. And when emotional engagement is removed, action becomes more visible. That's why these questions matter. They reflect a shift in her internal focus. She's no longer asking, "How do I feel when I'm around him?" She's asking, "Who is he becoming?" That question carries weight. It suggests respect beginning to form independently of emotion. Notice also what she's not asking. She isn't probing for reassurance. She isn't seeking clarity about your intentions. She isn't trying to pull you back into emotional exchange. That restraint tells you she's observing rather than influencing, watching rather than steering. Your role here is not to impress or perform. Stoic presence doesn't require elaboration. You don't oversell your progress. You don't justify your path. You simply speak calmly, honestly, and without urgency. That composure reinforces what the questions are already trying to discover, that your life has direction beyond reaction. Purpose has gravity. It draws attention without effort because it signals independence. When she senses that your focus isn't anchored to her approval, it changes the emotional balance. You are no longer something to manage or influence. You become something to understand. Indirect personal questions appear when attraction begins to shift from emotional familiarity to respect. And respect, once it takes root, creates a different kind of pull, one that doesn't rely on persuasion, but on presence. And this is where it's worth pausing. These shifts don't announce themselves loudly. They reveal themselves quietly, in tone, in curiosity, in what she chooses to notice. Take a moment to reflect on what you've experienced so far. If this resonates, tap like to support the channel, leave a comment, sharing your thoughts, or simply type a specific sentence below. Sometimes awareness is the real turning point, and the next insight builds directly from here. Number 8. Vulnerability slips through. When vulnerability begins to appear, it rarely announces itself. She doesn't sit you down for a deep emotional conversation. She doesn't frame what she shares as something important. Instead, it slips through casually. A brief mention of stress, a passing comment about feeling unsure, a quiet admission of doubt. The words sound light, almost incidental, but the emotion behind them is real. This kind of vulnerability is unguarded. It isn't strategic. It isn't designed to pull you closer or test your reaction in obvious ways. It emerges because something inside her has softened enough to allow it. Earlier, emotional walls existed for a reason. She didn't feel safe enough or steady enough to let uncertainty show. Now, that resistance is weakening. Stoicism is often misunderstood here. It's not emotional shutdown or detachment from feeling. It's emotional containment, the ability to experience emotion without letting it spill outward in ways that destabilize others. A Stoic man doesn't suppress emotion, he regulates it. And regulation creates space. When you demonstrate that you can hold your own emotional state without panic, without pressure, without urgency, you signal safety. Not safety through reassurance, but safety through steadiness. You're not overwhelmed by her vulnerability. You don't rush to fix it. You don't absorb it as responsibility. You remain present without being reactive. That presence matters. People share vulnerability where they feel it won't create imbalance. If someone senses that their uncertainty will be met with anxiety, control, or emotional dependence, they keep it hidden. But when they sense calm containment, they allow more truth to surface. Her vulnerability slipping through tells you something important. She's beginning to trust the emotional environment around you again, not the relationship, not the future, the space, trusting that her honesty won't trigger pressure or expectation. Notice how different this is from earlier stages. This isn't curiosity or testing. It isn't observation or indirect engagement. This is exposure small, but meaningful. She's letting you see parts of her internal state without demanding response. Your role is simple and disciplined. You listen. You acknowledge without amplifying. You don't interpret vulnerability as invitation to push forward. Stoic restraint teaches that not every opening requires movement. Sometimes, holding space is the movement. When vulnerability slips through, it's because emotional containment has been felt. She senses that you can carry yourself, and once someone believes you can carry yourself, they begin to trust you with what they're carrying too. Number 9. She notices your growth without you announcing it. Real growth rarely introduces itself. It doesn't arrive with explanations, updates, or declarations of change. You didn't tell her you were working on yourself. You didn't point out how different you've become. And yet, she feels it, not through words, but through absence of old patterns, through restraint where there used to be reaction, through steadiness where there was once urgency. This kind of growth is unsettling in a quiet way. It can't be easily challenged or dismissed because it isn't performative. There's no announcement to argue with, no story to question. The change is felt in how you move, how you respond, how you no longer rush to fill space. And because it isn't explained, it feels more real. Marcus Aurelius believed that character speaks loudest when unadvertised. In his view, virtue loses power when it seeks recognition. The same applies here. When growth is loud, it feels defensive, as if it needs to be seen to be valid. When growth is quiet, it feels integrated, lived, permanent. She notices this through contrast. She remembers how you once reacted under uncertainty, how you might have chased clarity, reassurance, or emotional resolution. Now, those impulses are gone. You're not withdrawn, but you're not leaning forward either. Your presence feels self-contained, and that difference changes how she perceives you. What makes this especially magnetic is that it wasn't done for her. Growth that's motivated by validation still carries attachment. Growth that happens privately carries independence. And independence alters emotional hierarchy. She no longer feels like the axis your behavior turns around. Stoic discipline shows itself in restraint, in pacing, in choosing not to act when action is unnecessary. That discipline communicates more than improvement ever could. It says your life has structure beyond reaction, that you are governed internally rather than pulled externally. She doesn't need proof. She doesn't need updates. The absence of emotional volatility is proof enough. When she senses that your calm isn't conditional when it remains, whether she engages or not, It signals something rare: stability without demand. This is why unannounced growth carries weight. It isn't trying to convince. It isn't trying to win. It simply exists. And existence without explanation invites attention. It makes her reassess who you are now, not through memory, but through present reality. Quiet growth doesn't ask to be seen. It allows itself to be noticed, and when it is, it feels authentic, grounded, and far more magnetic than any version of change that needs to be declared. Number 10. Past conflicts lose their charge. One of the clearest signs that something has shifted internally is how the past begins to feel. Old arguments no longer surface with emotional heat. The moments that once carried tension, blame, or defensiveness now feel distant, almost neutral. She doesn't bring them up to justify herself. She doesn't revisit them to reopen wounds or assert position. In many cases, she doesn't mention them at all. And that absence speaks loudly. This isn't avoidance, it's acceptance. Emotional charge fades when the mind no longer needs the past to protect itself. Earlier, conflict may have served a purpose. It created structure. It justified distance. It gave meaning to separation. As long as resentment remained active, the emotional door stayed closed by default. But resentment requires energy to maintain, and over time, that energy drains. Stoicism has always emphasized this truth. Explanation does not dissolve resentment, restraint does. Time alone isn't enough. Time paired with emotional non-interference is what allows old narratives to lose their grip. When you didn't argue your version of events, didn't defend yourself, didn't demand understanding, you removed the fuel that kept conflict alive. Without opposition, the mind eventually re-examines its own conclusions. Not out of obligation, but out of quiet reassessment. When she looks back now, the emotional charge simply isn't there. The intensity that once justified separation feels disproportionate, and without intensity, the conflict loses relevance. Notice how different this is from reconciliation through debate. There are no apologies demanded, no points scored, no emotional scorekeeping. The past isn't being rewritten, it's being set down. That's an important distinction. Stoic acceptance isn't about forgetting or minimizing what happened. It's about no longer allowing it to dictate the present. When past conflicts lose their charge, it means she no longer needs them as emotional armor. They're no longer tools for distance or defense. And once the past stops being weaponized, space opens for something new to form. This doesn't mean everything is resolved. It means the emotional barriers have softened. The mind is no longer anchored to old grievances. And in that neutrality, the future becomes possible again, not because everything was fixed, but because nothing needs to be fought anymore. Stoicism teaches that peace isn't created through winning arguments, but through refusing to keep them alive. And when restraint replaces resistance, the past naturally loosens its hold. What remains is clarity. And clarity is what allows forward movement to be considered quietly, without force. As you sit with this, notice how different true acceptance feels from forced closure. There's no dramatic moment, no announcement, just a quiet shift where the past stops pulling emotional weight. Take a second to reflect on that in your own life, where old stories may have lost their grip, not because they were resolved, but because they were no longer fed. If this resonates, pause the video for a moment and let that realization land. And if you're willing, leave a comment sharing what stood out to you, or simply type, "The past no longer leads me." Let's see what fascinating insights are waiting for us. Number 11. Reaching out feels heavy for her. This is the final and most revealing sign. When she considers reaching out now, it no longer feels easy. It doesn't feel casual. It doesn't feel automatic. Every possible message carries weight. Not because you became distant or cold, but because silence restored consequence. And consequence changes how action feels. In the past, contact may have felt light, effortless. A message could be sent without much thought because the emotional outcome felt predictable. She knew what response would come. She knew where she stood. Reaching out didn't require courage, it required convenience. But that certainty is gone now. And without certainty, vulnerability becomes real. When she thinks about messaging you now, she has to consider risk. What if you don't respond the same way? What if the old dynamic doesn't return? What if reaching out reveals more than she's ready to expose? These questions create emotional gravity, and gravity makes even simple actions feel significant. Stoic philosophy has always understood this distinction. The Stoics believed meaningful action should never be casual. When something truly matters, it demands intention. It asks for presence. It requires acceptance of outcome. Your silence did exactly that. It removed emotional shortcuts. It restored weight to choice. You didn't make contact difficult by withholding or manipulating. You made it meaningful by not chasing, by not restoring comfort on demand, by not lowering the cost of access to your attention. And because of that, any movement toward you now carries vulnerability. This is not fear, it's respect. Fear avoids. Respect hesitates. Respect considers consequence. When reaching out feels heavy, it's because she understands that her action would matter again. It wouldn't be ignored. It wouldn't be neutral. It would mean something. From a Stoic perspective, this is the quiet restoration of value. You didn't argue your worth. You didn't demand recognition. You allowed time and restraint to speak, and they spoke clearly. Silence restored gravity. Gravity restored intention. And intention is the gateway to genuine connection. If she reaches out now, it won't be because she's bored or curious. It will be because she's ready to step into vulnerability, knowing it carries consequence. And that is the clearest sign of all. You matter again, not because you tried to be felt, but because you allowed absence to reveal weight. When action becomes heavy, it means meaning has returned. And once meaning returns, everything changes. What all of this points to is a simple truth most people misunderstand. When someone truly comes back, it isn't driven by impulse or emotional noise. It's driven by weight, by the quiet realization that something meaningful was lost, and that reaching toward it now carries consequence. Nothing you saw today was loud or dramatic, and that's exactly why it matters. These signs only appear when you stop chasing outcomes and start standing firmly in yourself. When silence isn't used as a tactic, but as a reflection of inner steadiness, that's when value re-emerges. Not because you demanded it, but because you allowed space for it to be felt. If this resonated with you, take a moment to like the video so more people can find it. Leave a comment and share which sign stood out to you the most, or what you've noticed shift when you chose calm over reaction. And if you're ready to go deeper, watch the recommended videos on screen now. They build directly on this idea and show what happens next when silence, restraint, and stoic presence continue to do their work.